What up, fam? It is your favorite cousin, your favorite uncle, your favorite nephew, your favorite father, your favorite brother, your favorite son, your best friend's best friend. It's me, Dr. Larry, and welcome to Living For You, the YouTube channel. This is a safe space. It's a positive place in which we come together, we learn and we grow and we develop and we become better people in ourselves, me included, and we go out and we share with the world. For those of you who've been following loyally and faithfully for the past year or so, thank you. I love you. You're family. You're in my prayers. You're in my life. You're a part of me. You're part of this whole thing. Those of you who are watching all the time, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. There's no point in watching the channel and not subscribing to the channel. So welcome. Go ahead. We already know we're claiming it, that thousands of you who are watching are going to go ahead and subscribe to the channel so we can grow the fam, we can grow this platform, and we can do many, many more things beyond that. For those of you, this is your first time seeing me, I am Dr. Larry Smith. I am a certified licensed spiritual coach, life coach, but I'm also an author, an entrepreneur, historian, and educator. There's so many hats that I wear. And if you want to know about those hats, you can actually learn more about me at www.liveforyoucoaching.com. That is www.liveforyoucoaching.com. You can find out more about my life coaching business, my background, why I got into life and spiritual coaching, what I know, what I've learned, what I've cultivated, and how I'm still on this journey along with you, bettering myself just as you should be bettering yourself daily. That is what we're doing together, and that's why we come here. So go ahead and hit up that website, www.liveforyoucoaching.com, for more information. If you want to follow my personal social media, you can actually follow me on both Instagram and on Facebook at Dr. Larry Smith. That's Instagram and Facebook at Dr. Larry Smith if you want to follow me. All right, now, shifting gears. Let's get serious. The baby. Toxic masculinity, and all that comes behind that. I wanted to get on here today because of several things that have been happening within my life, within social media, within the world and entertainment and everything. So most of us probably at this point, I didn't want to post the video because the video was profanity written. It was offensive, had a lot of stuff going on, but the baby had a concert in Florida this past weekend, and he made a few disparaging comments relating to homosexuality, performing sexual acts, HIV and AIDS that were really problematic in the whole package deal that it was packaged in and the way it was done. And he's been holding his guns on it, saying, well, I didn't mean it this way, people take it out of context. Sir, when people say you take things out of context, at the end of the day, people know what they hear. And millions of people don't take things out of context. Perhaps you said what you said in the wrong context. And it was kind of a random comment anyway. Why would you say what you said within that moment? But that's one thing, of course. And then, so of course, I've also been watching the news and everything. And then I see things like Ed Buck. Ed Buck is a Democratic Party donator here from California, donor. He makes a lot of money. He spends a lot of money with the party. But it just so happens that in the last 3 or 4 years, he's had mysteriously black men, black LGBTQ men, dying at his home from drug overdoses and or other reasons. And he's just now being brought to justice. And nothing has been ever said about this, as much as we talk about Black Lives Matter and we protest and we march and we do all of these things for Black lives in support of Black Lives Matter, because Black lives do matter. But some Black lives get ignored, so we'll touch on that. We'll get there in just a second. And then, of course, lastly, in my own personal life, I had this interesting, somewhat weird, somewhat different, but interesting nonetheless discussion with my brother about masculinity and what masculinity is, and how he was ultimately saying that a man, a real man, doesn't want a masculine woman that he termed lady man, offensively, and they want a more feminine woman, and then I read some of the comments from him and exchanges between him and some of the people, and he was basically promoting this machismo, this macho man, this hyper masculinity, this toxic masculinity approach to it, all of it, and it was homophobic, and it was anti-female, and it was toxic. It was just a whole bunch of things in the dialogue that was going on. So all of that, the baby, the Ed Buck situation, talking to my brother, all of this culminated in me saying I need to get on here and do a video about masculinity, black men, manhood. I don't know what to call it in a structured way, but it's about black men, masculinity, manhood, and all of this other stuff that we got going on with gender and sexuality and things. Now, what I have come to know in working with black men and teaching black men and living amongst black men and raised by black men, around black men, and being a black man, there is so much to learn about manhood and masculinity amongst black people. Specifically black men, but black women do display certain tendencies of promoting toxic masculinity as well, and they don't even notice it. They may not display it always from themselves, but they definitely promote it and somehow condone it in their own ways many times too. And that's a whole nother discussion in itself, because this particular discussion right here, this thing right here, is really me talking to black men. Yes, black women, you're welcome to have this discussion and to engage this discussion and to listen and take this discussion, but I'm talking to my brothers right here with this one, because we need to hear some of the things I'm about to say. First of all, let's be clear on what masculinity and femininity is. When we look at gender, people automatically jump and say it's a biological construct. If you're a boy and you were born with 4 parts, you're a boy and you're a man, you're masculine. If you're a girl and you were born with girl parts, you're a girl, and you're a woman, you're feminine, and that's just the way it works. But what people fail to realize is that on an energetic level, on a spiritual level, masculine and feminine energy has always existed, okay? Let's just look at creation in itself, right? There's creation that is structured, what we count as the 4 seasons and the different time periods, and the sun going up and the sun coming down and the star placement and all of this solar stuff that we have. That's a very organized, ordered, structured, logical thing that happens. That's a very masculine energy. But then when you look at flowers and you look at nature and you look at mountains and you look at the birds and the animals and all these beautiful colors and this vibrant, kind of delicate looking beauty, that's a feminine energy. So that's both masculine and feminine energy working in nature naturally. It just occurs from a higher plateau, from a natural and spiritual energetic level automatically. That's where masculine and feminine energy originate from. And if you go into any teachings, like for example the Buddha, the Buddhism, and talk about the yin and the yang, that's what it's talking about. It's talking about that masculine and feminine energy, that light and that dark, that logical and that supernatural, the mixture of it all. Or should I say logical and beautiful and delicate and rugged and all this stuff blending to make a complete picture. So therefore, masculine and feminine energy is something that happens energetically and naturally, automatically by itself. But we as humans, in our limited conception of reality, we've associated masculine and feminine energy with male and female biology. So if you're a man, you're supposed to be masculine, that's your way. And if you're a female, you're supposed to be feminine, that's your way. But it doesn't always work that way. Sometimes men display feminine tendencies and sometimes women display masculine tendencies. And there's nothing wrong with that, because that's just operating just as nature and just as energetic and spirit, how spirit happens all the time. So there's nothing wrong with a woman displaying masculine tendencies, and there's nothing wrong with a man displaying feminine tendencies. But as humans, we figure your tendencies and your display should match your gender or your biological parts. And that couldn't be the furthest from reality and the furthest from really logical. Just on a logical plateau, to expect one thing from someone so dynamic as a human, with different experiences, different comportments, different mentalities, different personalities, is an illogical way of seeing life. But we tend to see the binary constructs that we've created for ourselves, for ease, for understanding, for interpretation. We tend to focus on that as though that is the only reality that exists, and that couldn't be any further from the truth. So when you get certain things like the baby making comments about masculinity, now don't let it escape you. The mere fact that his name is the baby and he's discussing masculinity and manhood shouldn't escape you as ironic, right? Because I would think anybody who's calling themselves the baby wouldn't be mature enough to have the conversation of any gravity on this subject. I mean, you're walking around calling yourself a grown man, the baby. But that's neither here nor there. That's, you know, sideline, feline shade, but I mean, worth the question. Anyway, this idea that a black man can display his masculinity. And I know what slavery did. I know that slavery was an emasculating situation, but it was also a defeminizing situation as well. Equally, what men didn't experience worse things than women. Slavery was a universal system that everybody who was under the system experienced it in not so good ways. And it was very diverse. So there was a defeminizing and an emasculation going on there too. And at the same time, there was a feminizing of men and emasculating of women as well happening. So slavery created this feeling amongst us, black people, African descendant people, of confusion of sexuality, of confusion of gender, of confusion of who we are and how we present in this world. And unfortunately, people like the baby in his comments, I've seen people like Lil Duval, T.I., who I had an appreciation for. I'm starting to hear more of the things he says, and so many other people, Dr. Umar, Dr. Boyce Watkins, and some of these black leaders who are supposed to be speaking on behalf of the black community, pro-black people, using anti-black, racist, white supremacist conversations as it relates to gender, sexuality, and how we present in this world from a masculine, feminine perspective. It's a mess, right? No one has the answers, and no one has the solutions, and no one understands fully what the hell they're talking about on a spiritual level, or let alone on an actual physical, emotional, biological, chemical level. Nevertheless, comments are made that heightens kind of, and I'm going to be honest and clear and transparent. When it comes to the black community specifically, the most privileged group of people in the black community are black men. Heterosexual black men are the most privileged in the black community, because everybody else, be it women, be it same gender loving, LGBTQ, trans, you name it, anybody else black in the black community outside of black heterosexual men have to deal with the consequences of being marginalized, have to deal with the experience of being marginalized externally outside of the black community and internally within the black community. So the most privileged African American person are black men. However, there are several things that are interesting in that regard. It's because they're the most privileged, they're also the most targeted for the most stuff outside of the community. So you look at, I saw a picture where a black man was protecting the black family and protecting his wife and his kids, and he was getting scars all in his back. And I'll try to find it and post it if I can, but it's a very interesting picture because that is kind of the makeup. But the problem is, black men take the pain and the mistreatment and the abuse that they get from the outside communities, and they find someone within the community, which is usually black women, black LGBTQ people, and they impose that on them. In many ways. In many ways. And that abuse that they get from the outside is almost like they have to abuse somebody to feel full of themselves, to feel like men, to feel important, to feel as though they're the power dynamic. So they abuse those who are marginalized, women, LGBTQ, within their community. And it's not fair. And the reason why I say it's not fair, because the moment there is something that goes down with black men, like you say George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, I can go, this goes on and on, Trayvon Martin, it's always a heterosexual black man, or perceived or appearing heterosexual black man, who is usually the face of many of the movements that women and same gender loving LGBTQ people in the black community goes and run to support and to speak out and to protest for. But black men never give the same towards those who do for them. All you get are black heterosexual men never give the same back to those who do for them. And we see it happen quite often. Case in point, the Ed Buck situation. Black gay men were dying at this man's house. and nothing was being done. And black men weren't saying, let's speak up about this. Let's fight for this, because all black lives matter. Why are there gay black men dying at this man's house? Black heterosexual men weren't fighting for that cause. When trans women are being killed at a higher number than other groups, black men aren't speaking against that cause. In fact, sometimes black heterosexual men are perpetuating the myth that a black trans woman tried to deceive a heterosexual man, and that led to her death. She has to be responsible for her death. Same thing when black women are reporting abuse and reporting violations and being treated like garbage by black men. Black men seem to blame them, the victims, for their experience. But no one outside of black heterosexual men within the community do that to them. No one said George Floyd was responsible for his death inside the community who was fighting for him. No one said Ahmaud Arbery was responsible for his death. No one said Trayvon Martin was responsible for his own death. All they did, the people within the community did, was rally and say, we need to speak out against this because this is unfair. Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter was founded by women, members of the LGBTQ, and they were supporting black lives. And in particularly, the black lives that they were fighting for were black heterosexual male lives. But the same thing isn't given back in return. Isn't given back in return. And the black men, heterosexual men, are the ones with the privilege. And so that leads me to my brother's conversation. This idea of masculinity and femininity. It's almost as like when black heterosexual men, and even sometimes within the gay community, you hear it too, when they talk about the difference between masculine and feminine energy, they talk about feminine energy as if it is something less than valuable, less than important. One of the worst things you can be in the black community is a feminine black man, because somehow you're perceived to be weaker. And on the flip side of that coin, one of the worst things you can be is a masculine black woman, because somehow you're wanting too much. You're too aggressive for a man. It beckons the conversation, are there childhood unresolved mother issues when someone can't take a strong woman? Are there childhood mother issues that maybe need to address? Instead of trying to change those around you, have you ever considered doing the work changing within you and how you perceive life based on your experiences? Because that could be why you are talking the garbage that you are talking about masculine and feminine energy between men and women. Because someone who is healthy, whole, and complete and are aware of themselves and present will understand that masculine and feminine energy exist in both sexes, both genders, all the time, everywhere concurrently, and a whole person is able to navigate through both of those when appropriately. I'm not going to have a hyper-masculine energy when dealing with a baby or with small children. I'm going to be more nurturing and more considerate and more concerned and more compassionate. But I'm also going to have to defend myself or defend those I love or take action or be in a boardroom. I might project more of a masculine energy to get what I need to get accomplished in that situation. But not every situation requires one consistent pattern of being. You have to be able to healthily weave your way in those things and use them for when they need to be used in the appropriate situation. Because you can be hyper-masculine in an inappropriate situation, and you can be hyper-feminine in an inappropriate situation. That's just the way it works, because you weave between both of them. It's who you are. You're a combination of the both of them. So so listening to the comments of the baby, just watching how we marginalize other people within the community who are just as black, just as man, just as manly, just as capable, just as leaders, just as powerful, just as resourceful, just as helpful, just as contributing to the community because of our anti-feminine. And I'm going to say it, I think sometimes within the black community we are anti-black female. We are anti-feminine in general. That is a Western white concept. Because if you go back to Africa pre-colonialism, women had power. Women had influence. Lineages went through women. Women were just as important as men. There was a balance between the genders. There was a balance between the sexes. And they saw that balance, and they valued that balance, and they did their part within that balance, and there wasn't giving more power to one over the other. That is a westernized, European, white social construct to hypervalue masculinity, to hypervalue the man over everybody else, and specifically hypervalue the heterosexual man over everybody else. We have got to stop what we're doing here with these constructs. See them for what they are, and break them. Homophobia doesn't belong in the black community. Hypermasculinity doesn't belong in the black community. Hyper machismo, anti-feminine does not belong in the black community, because those are the people standing the hardest to maintain and sustain and prolong and to keep strong the black community. If these people stop doing that, we're in trouble. We're in trouble. Because black men, let's be honest, you haven't been dependable for years. You're only wanting to wield power instead of take a seat next to enjoying. You can't run people, you need to run with people. It's a difference. And so to all those black heterosexual men out there who feel powerless, that's your doing. To all those black heterosexual men who feel threatened by femininity, by women who are alpha or who are strong women, those are unresolved mommy issues that you need to address and find healing with. Because what you're doing is you're promoting toxicity and you're creating an anti-spirit within the community. And we need everybody in the community to come together for us to be able to move forward from where we are to where we want to go. Period. Period, period, period. So, the baby, your comments were unfounded. T.I., you're wrong for supporting it. My brother, I love you, but you're wrong in your comments, because and those of you who didn't support the black LGBTQ who are dying under the hands of Young Buck, or the trans women who are dying, you're wrong. Because all black lives matter. And until we get that logic and we stop with the stupid rhetoric that there's certain things that are anti-black, because the way it looks right now is the only thing that's black is heterosexual black men, black masculinity. Everything else is considered anti-black. When you look at some of those pro-black movements like Umar and Boyce Watkins and other people and Brother Polite and all these people, they're always anti-feminine, anti-female, and they're always anti-gay, and they're anti-trans and anti-everything but black heterosexual men. You cannot have a community with only black heterosexual men. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't function. There are useful resources that everybody brings to the community, and until we recognize that, we are going to continue to be having some of the issues that we have been having for 100 years plus. That's it. I had to, talk about that because it's so disturbing that we're still having to have this conversation in 2021 when we have access to the internet. I'm going to do a video on pathologies and breaking generational things, because I think that needs to be said in so many ways. I think that needs to be said, that we got to break some things, because some things are doing us damage. So anyway, I love you, family. As I always say, I love you with the highest love, the love of God, the love of the Spirit, the love of Christ, whatever you want to say. I love you with that, the highest. As I always say, I will see you in the next video.